Bitcoin is like gunpowder. You either adopted it or you got wiped out, and the same thing is happening today with money. In this video, I'll be explaining why Bitcoin's rise is inevitable and why ignoring it comes at a cost. When you think of gunpowder, you probably think of war, muskets, and cannons, but what it really was a technological breakthrough that changed the power dynamics of civilization. For centuries, castles, knights, and feudal lords defined power. Then, Chinese alchemists stumbled upon gunpowder, an explosive discovery that began as fireworks but quickly became weapons. Gunpowder reached Europe and innovation exploded. Hand cannons, artillery, and eventually firearms spread across the Western world. In 1453, the supposedly unbreakable walls of Constantinople fell in weeks under Ottoman cannons, ending a 1,000-year empire almost overnight. That moment proved a lesson. Any country that didn't use gunpowder would be wiped out. Adoption wasn't optional, and to survive, you needed it. Entire civilizations started to reorganize around this one technology. Unlike the iPhone, cars, or computers, it wasn't about convenience. This was about survival. Better technology forced the world to change. And today, it's not warfare being reshaped, it's money. Bitcoin is imposing itself on the global financial system. Like gunpowder, Bitcoin started in secrecy. It was first released on a small cryptography forum as the first working form of digital money. And what started as an experiment has now spread to millions of people all over the world. Gunpowder reshaped how civilizations can defend themselves from armies, and Bitcoin is reshaping how individuals, corporations, and nation-states can defend themselves from inflation and money printing. Before Bitcoin, every money in history could be debased, and now for the first time we have absolute scarcity. A fixed supply of 21 million. That discovery is like gunpowder. Once it exists, it can't be uninvented. And once the world starts to figure out what this means, Bitcoin's rise is no longer a question of if, but when. Unlike gunpowder's accidental discovery, Bitcoin was created to solve a specific problem. Most governments today spend more than they bring in. They're running large deficits, and the only way to keep funding themselves is by printing more money. And as deficits grow, inflation doesn't just continue, it gets worse. This directly affects bonds, which is the largest asset class in the world. Investors know that the interest rate they get on the bond will always be less than what governments have to print. This forces capital to move, so while stocks, bonds, and real estate do offer some protection, they can't compete with Bitcoin's absolute scarcity, and choosing these assets over Bitcoin is like showing up to a fight with flaming arrows versus cannons. This pressure isn't just personal, it applies to institutions, corporations, and nation states. This is why we've seen the biggest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, launch a Bitcoin ETF. It's why countries like El Salvador started buying. BlackRock didn't enter Bitcoin for ideological reasons, but because the system itself is broken. Traditional assets aren't working anymore, and even the biggest players are being forced to seek protection. And once one player adopts, it doesn't just happen in isolation, it creates pressure on everyone else. And this is where Bitcoin's game theory starts to kick in. Game theory is the study of how rational players make decisions when the outcome depends on what other people do. And the core idea is simple, no one wants to lose. With gunpowder, if your neighbor rolled cannons onto the battlefield, you couldn't just say no thanks. You had to either adapt or you'd get wiped out. In money, the same dynamic now plays out with Bitcoin. If your competitor adopts a superior store of value, they're protecting themselves while you're left exposed, and to keep up, you're forced to adopt too. And we can already see this happening. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF was the most successful product launch in the company's history. And this puts pressure on firms like Vanguard, who are forced to reconsider or risk losing clients. MicroStrategy bet its whole balance sheet on Bitcoin and went from a $1 billion company to a $100 billion company in just 5 years. And this kind of growth forces other corporations to start paying attention. And when El Salvador adopted Bitcoin, their holdings have risen hundreds of %, giving them a strong financial base that countries their size may not have. And even the US, the global superpower, is openly debating what their Bitcoin strategy is going to be. Other countries like the Philippines and Brazil are drafting serious Bitcoin legislation. And just like with gunpowder, once one player gains an advantage, the rest are forced to follow. And this isn't just nations and corporations, it applies to you too. For example, if your neighbor buys Bitcoin first, their purchasing power increases while yours struggles to keep up. And over time, that gap becomes impossible to ignore. Usually in the past, refusing to adopt a new technology only costs you convenience, but with Bitcoin, the stakes are far higher. Traditional investments like bonds, real estate, or even stocks are barely keeping pace with inflation. Prices of goods are rising at the same speed or slightly faster, which means that you're running just to stand still. Let's take a simple example. If you were to take $10,000 10 years ago and put it in a classic 60-40 portfolio, today it would be worth around $20,000, which is Not terrible, but if you compare it to Bitcoin, that same $10,000 would be worth hundreds of thousands. This gap is the opportunity cost that you have in waiting. Housing makes it even clearer. In 2017, the average US home cost about 24 Bitcoin. Today, it's only 4. In dollars, housing keeps rising because more dollars are printed. In Bitcoin, it keeps getting cheaper. That's the difference between measuring with a shrinking ruler versus one that actually holds value. The problem isn't just what you lose today, it's how this loss compounds over time. So a portfolio that once felt safe with stocks and bonds now doesn't keep up. And you can work your entire life, but if your savings is growing slower than the price of goods, then this gap only widens. This is why retirement feels harder than ever, because the ruler that you're using is shrinking while the cost of goods keeps climbing. For individuals, the cost of ignoring Bitcoin is weaker purchasing power and uncertain retirements. But for corporations and governments, if you resist a breakthrough like gunpowder or Bitcoin, you don't just lose wealth, you start to lose power and influence. In the 1500s, Japan quickly adopted firearms after contact with the Portuguese. But under the Tokugawa shoguns, guns were regulated, not because they hated progress, but because firearms threatened the peace. During peacetime, Japan stagnated in military progress. Then in the mid-1800s, foreign ships armed with advanced cannons arrived on their shores, and Japan realized just how far they had fallen behind. By restricting gunpowder, Japan made itself vulnerable, and they were forced to open their borders on Western terms. And this same pattern is playing out with Bitcoin. Governments have tried to ban it. China outlawed mining, India threatened to criminalize it, Nigeria cut off banking access, and yet the network didn't stop. Hash rate relocated, adoption kept rising, and Bitcoin came back stronger. A decentralized technology can't be erased. Resistance doesn't stop Bitcoin, it just shifts adoption to those who are willing to embrace it. With gunpowder, you could eventually make more cannons to catch up, but with Bitcoin, once nations, corporations, and individuals accumulate it, there's nothing you can do to make more. The supply is capped at 21 million. Every delay makes it more expensive, and every hesitation makes it harder to compete. Gunpowder leveled the playing field. Ordinary citizens with muskets could challenge knights and castles. It broke the monopoly on power. Bitcoin does the same for money. By capping supply and putting self-custody in your hands, it levels the financial playing field. Citizens now have a way to protect themselves against governments that can endlessly print currency. The more you fight it, the further behind you fall. History proved this with gunpowder, and money is proving it with Bitcoin. So every person, corporation, and government on the planet has a decision to make. Embrace Bitcoin or ignore it. These consequences are real, and they'll only become more obvious over time. Most people think that buying Bitcoin is the risk, but the real risk is ignoring it. And just like gunpowder, the only winning move is to play. My name's Austin. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.